to Hugo. As I don't know if you were on earlier, but I've seen a number of Hugo's presentations before. Always impressive. I love them. I think everybody will be happy with this, and look forward to hearing more. Take it away, Hugo.
No pressure. Ted, how much do you charge to edit my recording to make me sound intelligent later?
I don't think we need to worry about that. I think
Thank
it'll
you.
be just fine.
So hi everybody. Thank you for attending. Today's session is called Top 5 Power Platform Applications Everyone Should Build. My name is Hugo Bernier and I'm an MVP. I'm also a member of the Patterns and Practices team. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. As we said before, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. And I like my sessions to be interactive and fun. So let's try to keep that going. So I'm an independent consultant. I've been pretty much an independent consultant most of my life. I come from a management consulting background, and I consider myself the world's laziest developer. And I've never really bothered to check whether it's true or not. But the fact that I consider myself the world's laziest developer means that wherever there's a way for me to avoid doing work, I will avoid doing so. And the solutions I'll be presenting today are all done from this perspective. It's basically, what's the expression? Give a man a fish and you feed them for a day. Give them a poisoned fish, you feed them for the rest of their life. So the idea here is to actually teach you how to take apps that are either templated or available or really easy to customize and to get value right away. And then if we have enough time at the end of the sessions, we'll talk about ways to improve these sessions even more. But again, my commitment here is we're trying to look at the lowest effort to actually deliver value and for you folks to look like heroes.
I've stopped presenting, so you can take over.
Well, thank you. Can you not see my screen? All right. You can see my screen now?
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. Good. Thank you. Okay. Let's see if we can get this going. Try to monitor the chat, but if I don't see you in the chat, feel free to interrupt. I'm easily distracted anyways. All right. So one of the things that I would like for you to be aware is I'm also one of the founders of the Citizen Developers User Group. And I kind of wish that Microsoft stopped renaming the products all the time because I have to change the slide all the time. In fact, this slide is already out of date because it's not called Common Data Services anymore. It's called Dataverse. But the Citizen Developer User Group is actually a user group where we're trying to talk about the Power Platform, and we're trying to not be all about just demoing features of the Power Platform. It's boring, right? What we're trying to, I mean, it's boring. It's exciting, but there's a big gap, I think, in the Power Platform. We're trying to sell the Power Platform as this amazing citizen development platform that allows you to enable your citizen developers in your organization, but we really don't have the conversations about, well, how do we do that, right? How do I empower citizen developers in my organization? How do I, if I'm an IT decision maker, how do I allow these citizen developers to actually go and create apps without creating another shadow IT where people are going to go nuts and destroy all my data? If I'm a developer, how is my role changing as a developer with citizen developers? Because maybe I'm no longer that person who has to build an app every year. That boring employee sign-off form, or the app of the year that developers have to rewrite every year, because now your citizen developers can take over and do these things. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But so the role of the developer is changing a little bit. Because maybe now, instead of being the person that has to write these apps every year, maybe what I'm doing is I'm creating the APIs that my citizen developers can consume in a responsible way and enforce all the business rules. Maybe I want to create some PCF controls or controls that I can embed in the apps to be consistent, from a consistent branding or consistent experience, and that really changes the dynamics. And then if I'm a citizen developer, like how do I leverage the successes that other people have done, all the cool apps and the cool demos that people have done, and that's really what our citizen developer user group is about. So we meet once a month, usually the first Wednesday of every month. The next one is on December 3rd, and the amazing April Dunham will be there to, I'm sure she'll be presenting something amazing. Before we continue, I'd like to take the time to thank our sponsors. This is a great event that's put together. It's a shame that we have to do this remotely, but I'm sure that at some point we'll get together. Maybe we'll just have one big giant event where we can all get together. All right, so why would I pick the Power Platform, right? Can I just keep doing what I've been doing, writing apps from scratch? Why would I do the Power Platform? And when I'm talking about the Power Platform, again, we're talking about Microsoft Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agent, and Dataverse. This is going to be a hard one to remember to call it Dataverse. And I have another presentation layer which is all about Dataverse. Well, one of the things that we need to consider about the Power Platform is that our users are changing. And it is really creating a serious challenge for organizations. This is all based on research that Forrester did in 2020. But the one thing that's happening as everyone's switching to Microsoft 365 and making it easier for people to access apps from their mobile devices, from their homes, from wherever they are, more and more we have new users to support. Users that in the past maybe we didn't even want to support. The example of this is, let's say, in a manufacturing environment, typically in the past, organizations didn't always bother creating accounts for some of the people who work on the factory floor. But now with the Power Platform and Microsoft 365 and some licenses like the F1 and F3 licenses, I think it's kind of appealing for organizations to create apps and environments that your plant workers or your factory floor workers can actually start leveraging these apps. And so that's actually increasing the number of people who are consuming the IT services, which means that it also means more calls, more people that we have to support. The other thing that we have to consider is that, well, the current IT systems that we have don't meet our current needs. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one of the reasons is according to, well, maybe that's obsolete now, but the statistics were that the average age of the employee in an organization is getting close to 48% over the next 3 years. 48% of the average workers will be nearing retirement age. And so that means that over the next 3 years, about half of the people we have are going to want to leave and they're going to want to retire. And the retirement age is actually lowering. So that's making the problem even more difficult. Now we have new users, the users that are Instagram and Twitter and all the other stuff that my kids love to use. Those are the new users that will be coming in, and they're comfortable with different types of apps than maybe I was. I mean, I'm only 28, but the difference between the apps that I'm familiar with and the types of apps that my children are familiar with are very different. So the IT systems that we have don't meet our current users' needs, but they also don't meet our business needs, right? Because if you think of COVID, right, when COVID happened, a lot of organizations had to adjust how they were doing things, even including allowing people to connect remotely and to be able to work remotely. And unfortunately, in most organizations, there's very limited budget to make changes. And it's not something that's unique to you and your organization. This is something that's happening all across the board. The other challenge that we find typically in IT is, and stop me if you've heard this one, but for most stakeholders, the business owners, who get to talk to IT. The last time they probably talked to IT was probably 3 years ago, 3 to 5 years. And as far as they're concerned, the next time they'll get to talk to IT after they make changes to your app is probably going to be in another 3 years. So their typical reaction is going to be, I want every single feature known to man. Every single feature is super important because I know I'm not going to get your attention for another 3 years after this. And that's a challenge as well. So when we start using the Power Platform, we're able to actually adapt to changing business needs, and we're able to really do quick prototypes around, here's what I'm thinking this app should look like. Do you like it? Do you not like it? And maybe, hey, tomorrow I'll come back and I'll give you another version of this same app, and we can adjust really quickly. One of my clients implemented a COVID reporting and investigation tool from inception to actually deploying in production in less than 2 weeks. And the app completely changed over those 2 week periods. But one of the secret is that they work closely with between IT and the stakeholders. Imagine if we were doing this with the standard, waterfall approach where we say, okay, we're going to disappear for the next 6 months, and then we'll come back and we'll ask you if we were right, right? With the Power Platform, we're able to adapt and iterate really quickly. And so that's the other thing here is that our users more and more want self-service. Our users are becoming more and more educated, more comfortable with using apps. And remember, many years ago, back when I was really young, IT used to be a scary thing, right? Computers, I remember Windows XP, when you used to try to add a printer to your computer, the first thing you would do when you say add a printer and then you just do the add a printer wizard, the first thing you would do before you even selected a printer is it would say, the printer you've selected cannot be found. And it's like, I haven't selected a printer yet. I haven't gotten to that step. But the computer would start by insulting you as soon as you're starting, trying to add a printer. And so there's no wonder that, people with IT were not so happy with computers because computers made you feel stupid. But more and more computers don't make you feel stupid. People are more and more educated and more aware of how to use these apps. And because of this, the users are actually willing to self-serve, right? They want to create, well, they want to do their own stuff. They want to do their own requests and their own, um, whatever these things are, but they also want to build their own apps. And what's happening and what Forrester has found is the lack of internal and customer facing applications actually hurt business performance. Because again, if you think about IT is super busy, again, the cycles that we have to go through over super long projects, we have a tendency to not to be able to adapt quickly, and we're not able to meet the business needs, and that hurts everyone. In fact, according to another Forrester research, in the United States alone, there will be deficit of 500,000 developers by 2024. That's like in basically 4 years, almost 3 years soon. That's scary. If we are going to continue to want to change and to adapt and to have that digital digital transformation that we want our organization to have, we're not going to be able to do this with the amount of developers and IT resources that we have in an organization. So how do you do that? Well, that's when you start empowering the makers and the citizen developers and the people, hopefully the people like you who are hopefully in this session because they are interested in making a difference. I'm just going to quickly peek here at the chat, make sure everybody's still awake. Good. So again, if we look at what I'm a big fan of research, by the way. Don't believe what I say because I said it. Believe it because Forrester and Gartner and all these guys are telling you that that's what they found. So one of the things that you can do with using the Power Platform is to save a lot of money, right? In average, it costs 74% less to build an app using the Power Platform than the standard development cost. Thank you. I'm glad that someone else likes the stats. Um, then the reason for that, and we're talking here about the built-in capabilities, right? So the built-in connectors that are available, getting rid of the development efforts, getting rid of a lot of professional services fee. And I'm an independent consultant. I probably shouldn't like that, but the reality is, these professional services have been kind of milking organizations for a long time. Again, because we've been taking advantage of the fact that, oh, this is too complicated. Let us take care of it. And it's going to be this, we have to change this transmogrifier thing that nobody knows what it is, right? But now with the self-service capability, the ability for people to build things themselves and to really reduce the development cycles, we're reducing the cost. And even the vendor selection and the vendor purchase costs are much lower. Those are great stats. And I had the how much this was worth, but I can't remember what the numbers were. The other thing that we have to consider when it comes to IT, and no, those stats don't include Azure and Dataverse. Well, sorry, they do include Dataverse costs, but they don't include Azure costs. The other thing that we want to consider, there's a group called the Standage Group, and they like. Uh-oh. The voices are talking again. At least they're not telling me to burn things this time. So the Standish Group, they like to produce a report every year called the Chaos Report. And what they do is they look at IT projects and they look at the success rates and success or the failure rates of IT projects. And the interesting thing about the Chaos Report is every year they've come up with very scary numbers. One number, and the numbers change every year, but at one point, 1% of software projects were done successfully on time and on budget. Close to 48% of all those projects were just canceled plain together. And that's a lot of money that's being wasted, right? So when we're talking to your stakeholders or your IT decision makers about, Power Platform, Power Apps is expensive, we have to put that into consideration, right? And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but if you're going to an organization and you're saying, look at this cool app I can build, this one little app, and this app will cost you this much more in licensing for Power Platform, it's probably not the right way to try to get the Power Platform adopted in your organization. One way is to say, well, okay, so yes, I do need this Power Apps, premium licensing or premium connectors or things like that. But once I have this license in my organization, look at all the other things that I can use in this organization. And that's really one of the ways that I'm approaching this presentation is don't look at it as a single app. Look at it, this is a whole new set of services that you have in your organization that you're able to leverage. So the Standish Group, to go back to the Standish Group for a second, when they looked at the reasons why software projects fail, they did like the top 10 reasons. And, a lot of people will think IT, like technology, is in the top 10. It's frequently number 10 or 11 or 12 in terms of top 10 reasons. So it doesn't even make it to the top 10 reasons often. But if you look at the top 1, 2, and 3, it's usually things like lack of executive sponsorship. The business and the technology are doing too because the business tries to explain things they want in a language they think the IT wants to hear, and the IT people just go, yeah, I'm just going to ignore this because I want to go try this new cool technology because I want to build my resume. Right, and it's very sad, but that's the reality. Is that's really how often we work. So when you're using the Power Platform, you're able to reduce these communication barriers. You're able to actually make sure that you're focusing on delivering the value that the business users need, either because you're iterating quickly or because the business users and the stakeholders are the ones that are building these apps or configuring these apps. And again, the apps we're going to be talking about today are doing that. In terms of the things that the Power Platform can do, And this is not about selling you Power Platform, but there's some areas that I think we need to talk about. The number one thing that we have to consider is data integration, right? If you look at IT projects, you usually want to do, when you try to prioritize your IT project tasks, you want to look at the riskiest, um, the most technically risky components and the highest business importance. Well, pretty much on any project, any point of integration between two systems is pretty much always going to be the highest risk. And often the reason for that, and this is true, a lot of IT projects, what they'll do is they'll say, yeah, we're on time, we're on time, we're on time, because they're focusing on doing the fun stuff, the cool stuff, the easy stuff. But they're deferring the part where it's like, oh, I have to talk to this legacy system. And the legacy system is a pain. I hate talking to them. They just don't understand me. And the legacy system people are like, oh, these new IT people, I really hate talking to them. So they're avoiding talking to each other as long as possible. And then maybe 2 weeks before it's time to go live, they go, oops, I forgot. I thought you were supposed to do this. No, no, wait, I thought you were supposed to do this. So now we go from being, we're on time, we're on time, we're on time. And then 2 weeks before going live, we go, oops, we're 6 months behind, right? Short of a rip in the fabric of time, this should never happen. And the reason for that is because we have a tendency to prioritize the wrong things. Again, if you have a platform that makes things like data integrations and the connection between systems easier because there's hundreds of connectors available to you, it really thank you. Yeah, Kathleen takes over. And so if you have problems like this, just call Kathleen. But so in the Power Platform, you have all these connectors that are available to you, and you're able to leverage them. And keep in mind that there are some things like the ability for you to create your custom connectors, the ability to use OData feeds and things like that. It really makes it easy for you to connect to your legacy systems and your together. And again, we have to also consider that with the Power Platform, we have the ability to connect to your on-premise data in a secure manner using the data access gateway. And again, I think they change the name of that thing every time. It may not be called the data access gateway anymore, but there is this thing you can run in your on-prem environment that will make it possible for you to call APIs or call data resources, including things like file shares and things like that on your on-prem environment. So the other things that we have to consider is the increased staff productivity, right? Technology moves really, really fast. And if you wait even a month to implement something, you may have missed your window of opportunity. Think again of something like COVID, or think of something like, there's a huge opportunity here. Your business, your organization has an opportunity to meet a new business need and to adapt quickly. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, always, it's never about being the first to start. It's always about being the first to market. So if you have the ability to adapt quickly, it increases your return on investment. So you have lots of things that are built in the Power Platform, like things like common tasks and features and user interface, and the ability to do prototypes really quickly. That's huge. I thought someone had a question. No question. Okay. So, and as the development proceeds, right, you're able to actually make these adjustments really quickly. We talked about getting the IT people and the business people to talk together. Well, if these people are the same people, or if we've lowered the barriers, it's a lot easier to do that. The other thing that we have to consider is using the Power Platform, you have the ability to do mobile-friendly applications right out of the box, right? Mobile-friendly apps used to be that extra thing that was like, we don't want to do that. We'll just tell everyone that they have to run the app from their desktop, right? And that they have to be on VPN to be able to access this app. But now with the cloud, with mobile apps, with tablet devices, the ability to create mobile-friendly apps is absolutely a must. And some of the things that we can take advantage of that we're not even scratching the surface here. You're able to take advantage of things like the location awareness, the ability to take pictures and do things like augmented reality, artificial intelligence to recognize the images and to do things with it. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but those are our features that are built in that normally, in the typical development process used to be, yeah, that's just crazy. It's a nice to have, and we'll get to it maybe in 3 years. The other thing we have to consider is the enhanced security and compliance, right? Because all the apps that are built using the Power Apps meet the GDPR compliance. I hate acronyms. I don't know why I went in IT. I never remember acronyms. General Data Protection Regulation Compliance is the term here, right? So this is all the information technology and business standards, right? Everything, every link that you create, for example, is protected by Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. Those are all things that in the past used to be extra things that people would do or would have to add to their apps. That's all built in to your apps. And then the other thing that we have to consider, number 5, is smooth and automated business processes and functions, right? So the ability for you to create processes that happen because you did something, right? Because you changed the document, or you I know, you clicked on the button, or you went somewhere, or something, even something happened on your factory floor, right? An event happened on your factory floor that actually created the notification. Those things used to have to be manually triggered, and now they can be automated. And so that's cool, because what's happening is creating things like documents and reports and things like that. It used to be that doing this was the purpose of our work, right? We worked to create a document. We worked to create a form. Now, these documents, these forms, these tasks, they become the byproducts of doing our work, right? Because I created this, I don't know, because I did this on this page in SharePoint, or I added this document, this automated process happens magically. And that's great, because what it allows us to do is that we have to, we can actually focus on adding business value. And Anthony, it was nice to have you. Yes, please visit us on the Citizen Developer User Group. So where do I start? Right, I've been talking about why it's important, and I hope that you don't mind, and I'm spending the time to do this. But again, if all I'm doing here is to show you, here's an app and go build this, we're really losing kind of the value of the Power Platform, right? I'm looking at it more from a management consulting perspective, and one of my specialties, by the way, is to go into organizations that have failed at deploying IT projects multiple times, and I'm kind of like the cleaner upper, right? So I see a lot of scary stories, and that's the perspective I'm looking at it from. Those are the things that I don't think we can learn in watching YouTube videos or reading Power Apps to-dos. Thank you. So the key candidates are, first of all, when you look at replacing a business process or automating a business process, don't just go nuts and automate everything just because it would be fun. Here's where to start. Look at the most costly mistakes. And by costly mistakes, I don't necessarily mean money, right? We could be talking about loss of life here, loss of reputation, right? So look at these things. So for example, I mean, a simple example here is a consulting company that have their case studies, but they actually have a process by which when they put a document in this library, it'll automatically sanitize the case study to make sure there's no confidential information that's leaked. So they can build rules in the document to protect, here's the type of information we don't want to leak. This is just a silly example, but it's something that could end up costing them their reputation if they didn't fix that. The other thing to look at is frequency. Things that happen more often are probably better candidates than something that happens once a year. And again, we all have these processes that we have to do once a year, but guess what? You have a whole year to get to fix that process. But this one thing that happens every day, several times a day, or every week, those are all processes that you should probably look at. And in fact, when you look at the total cost of ownership and I forget the word right now, but what's the business value of doing this process? Try looking at how much time are each one of my employees spending, right? So count, okay, it takes every employee 10 minutes to do this process. I have, I don't know, 5,000 employees. The average salary for 10 minutes, it ends up costing me this much for times the number of employees that I have, times the number of times they have to do this in a day or in a week or in a year. That is really how much it's costing you to not do these things. And if you say, hey, I can take this process from 10 minutes a day per employee to less than 1 minute or to 10 minutes a week, those are great savings, right? So the frequency is a great way to identify that. Unless, of course, you've got the costly mistake. It's a process that happens once a year, but if I make a mistake here, like I don't know if you remember the story of the airline manufacturer that sent a contract from Europe to America, and they had because in French we have commas and periods in numbers are switched. So they had those numbers switched over, and it was not a good thing for them. So when costly mistakes are more expensive than frequent mistakes, you obviously want to do the costly mistakes, but frequency is also good. Number of participants. The more people you have, that's it. Return on investment. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Number of participants. As you add more people in a process, you're actually making that process less and less efficient, obviously, right? If you think about every time, I don't know, you create a task or you send an email or you have to have someone approve something, you've instantly added, because you don't have people that are just sitting here for the process to start happening, right? They're not refreshing, hitting F5 to see the task. So you create a task, that task needs to be approved. At some point, that person will get the task, and they'll say, oh yeah, okay, I'll approve it or reject it, whatever. But every one of these participants in the process increases the inefficiencies. So if you can look at processes where you have a lot of participants and make them more efficient by reducing maybe the timelines in between these points of communication, that's a great way to improve the business. And then governance. So anywhere where it's not optional to actually do something consistently because you're asked to do this by law, or just because I don't know you're an ISO compliant organization and you have to do this process this way, or you're following Six Sigma processes and you always want to do your process exactly the same way. Those are great ways to ensure consistency, right? And then we can talk about things like non-repudiation and things like that, like building processes where people are not able to say, hey, I didn't do this. I never did this. I never opened this document, or I never did this. You're able to actually build all this in your process. All right. And thank you for the great conversations in the chat. So how do you adapt, right? When you are looking at automating your business processes, there's kind of two rules that I always follow. The first thing is hide your business rules in a form. So that means, let's say here, let's just make this a bit more fun and interactive here. So let's say I have a form here that says, oops, that's not what I wanted. I'll just do something black here. I have a form that has a field that asks you, I don't know, to put an amount of money here. How much is this thing going to cost? And then here it says, you have to enter the vendors that will be supplying this. Now, maybe you have a business rule in your in your form or in your process, sorry, that says if this amount here is greater than a certain amount. So if it's greater than, so many dollars, we want you to to have 3 vendors that will submit a proposal. But if it's less than a certain amount, I want only one proposal, for example, one vendor, right? Normally, the way organizations do this is they'll actually write a super long document that explains people how to do this. And guess what? A lot of these processes are often things that people only do once or twice a year or whatever. So they're not necessarily experts in that business process. And the scary thing or the sad thing is if you decide that I'm going to change this rule, right? It's greater than when it's greater than this much, now I need a 4th vendor to submit a proposal. Then we have to retrain everybody. We have to resend everybody to this training. That's just probably not the right way to do this. So instead, what you can do is you can build a rule in the form that says, if I enter an amount, this field is now mandatory. And if that amount is greater than, let's say, this much here, now maybe I have a message that says, hey, please enter 3 proposals. And when I enter an amount that is greater than this much, now you actually say, please enter a 4th proposal here. Right? So you're hiding the complexities of the business rules in your form. Guess what? Again, when your rules change, you just change the form. You don't need to retrain people. The next time that someone starts that process, they will automatically get those new rules. And you can actually educate your users. One of the things that I'd like to do, I know I'm going off script here, but one of the things that I like to do is I like to actually always show the business process at the top of the form here. That's actually supposed to be a boat chart, but I like to put the business process, and it says like you are here, right? So that you're actually educating your users in terms of what's going to happen. The other thing that you can do is just go back quickly here on my diagram. So you can hide the business processes in your flows. So what am I talking about here? I hear that all the time. Okay, so what if I wanted to say, often what we'll do is we'll say, okay, so please fill your form, and then we'll send the form for approval. And what a lot of organizations will do is they'll say, please tell us, will you need to have this form approved by a VP or not, or by, by just your manager? Users shouldn't have to know this. So what you can do here is you can say, let's say this is an expense form, and I'm pointing at my screen like you can see what I'm pointing at. But let's say that this here is an expense form, and there's an amount here that is entered. And when I actually, it goes to my manager when I send it for approval, and those are supposed to be rectangles, but I guess I'm writing everything in italic today. But we can actually build a rule that says if this expense is greater than this amount, so is it greater than certain amount, send it to my VP maybe to approve. But if not, just just proceed, approve it, have the manager approve it, and you don't need to have the VP approve it. But if it's greater than a certain amount, have the VP approve it and continue. And guess what? Again, if eventually you start looking at this and you say, we're spending more money having our VPs approving small expenses than we would if we just increase the spending limit. So let's just change the spending limit here by I'm just adding $1 to my workflow here. And by doing that, automatically the business process, the workflows that are submitted here will automatically follow these new rules. I don't have to retrain my users. I don't have to send people on a training workflow for half a day. And that's the secret, right? So hide the rules in your forms. And I'm not above showing hiding fields or marking fields as not read only as required. and then hide all the stuff. Like I shouldn't have to tell the user, if you did this, please send it to this person, otherwise please send it to this person. Build that in the workflow, change your workflow as needed, but please educate your user. This is what you should expect next. And that's a great way to get people to get familiar with the processes. Again, keep in mind that requiring a budget, for example, is something that typically most organizations do once a year, right? And that process is probably not everyone. And of course, if there's people in accounting here and finance, they're like, yeah, this is my favorite process. But for the rest of the world, it's probably not their favorite process. And they probably, the last thing they want to do is have to know that process by heart. And I think Kathleen in the chat is making a great point, is doing it this way is a great way to get user buy-in versus reading a 150-page on the process. And yes, process maps. It's a great way to do this. So, but how do you, let's talk about process maps for a second. How do you decide how to build your process? Well, there's two rules that when I was a management consultant, they brainwashed me, and they taught me these two rules. And I like to always reuse these rules all the time. The two rules are no backseas, right? So, and it was not called no backseas in the fancy management consulting firm, but that's what I call it. You shouldn't be able to move forward from any step in your process if you're going to need something from that process later that you didn't get. Right. So, for example, I don't know your manager because our Azure AD is a nightmare and we don't have that information. So we're going to need your manager to approve this at some point, but we don't have your manager. So maybe we should ask you for your manager here, right? Or maybe there's something here that should make sure that I have this information, because that next step, or maybe a step later, like maybe I need to know your director, not your manager, and that's like 2-3 steps later. Well, don't allow the process to move forward unless you've captured all the information. The other aspect that we need to consider is every step in the business process should add value. If a step does not add value to the overall process, then it shouldn't exist. And that's probably the scariest one, because especially if you work with the government, I've done a lot of work in the public sector. We love our processes, right? We love our additional steps. So my favorite thing to do, by the way, is to actually get all the stakeholders well, not the stakeholders, but the participants in a process in a room, and I'll print the form in paper and I'll give them sticky notes. And I'll say, okay, so every one of you in this room is representing one of the participants in the process. So the first person who would initiate the process, please take this form and fill it up. And now pass it to the next person that you think is next in the process. And then you just step back and it's like watching a comedy of errors. It's like watching Mr. Bean or something, right? People are just becoming bumbling buffoons because they're like, oh, no, this step, no, you get this form. No, I don't get the form. You need to pass it to Mary first. And Mary's like, I've never got this form ever, right? Joe gets it. It's amazing how when you watch people kind of interact with the process all in one room with the form, how they quickly discover that their process is ridiculous, because the steps will go back and forth 17 times. People will disagree completely on what the process is, even though it's a process that, according to the business, it's always how we've always done it, right? And everybody knows the process. And the other thing that I do is I use sticky notes as a way to represent messages. So if there's a message that gets sent back and forth, between the users, get them to write sticky notes to each other and just watch the sticky notes fly around the table. And Christopher is saying the Kaizen value stream mapping is a great way to document and improve the process. You're absolutely right. I like to do it this way because, again, I like to have fun. I like to watch people because I can try to convince you that your process is a nightmare, and you might never listen to me. But when you see all these people in the room and they're like ready to fight each other because they disagree on the process, that's usually when they realize, yeah, maybe there's an opportunity for us to fix here. But yes, it's absolutely up to us to build a trust with the IT and therefore build credibility. And that's why, when we're talking about using the Power Apps and Power Platform in general, um, we're trying to do this by, first of all, being reactive and adaptive, right? So we're able to say, I'm not going to disappear for the next 6 months. I'm going to have this little workshop with you, and then tomorrow or next week, I'll come back and I'll show you how this process could be improved, right? We can do that, and this is the amazing thing. And you look like heroes. All right. So how do I go from 0 to 100 in no time? And this is going to sound weird, but I talked to my friend April Dunham, who I admire. She's amazing. But I asked her, I said, hey, April, I'm doing a presentation about the 5 apps that you should you should build. Yes, the other option is to ask me to build it. Uh, so I asked her, and I had pretty much figured out the whole personal, departmental, and organizational. But she said, first thing you should do to start learning is start with a game. And I think it's a brilliant idea because, when you're first starting to build an app in the Power Platform or Flow or something like that, uh, you have to understand a good business application for it. You have to understand the business rules. There's so many other external variables that stop you from being able to just start coding and start, if you want to call that coding, like start building an app together. But the great thing about a game is you can build something that's visually pleasing, that's amazing, that's fun to build, and you probably already know the rules, right? So I don't know, build a Hangman game or Sudoku game or Yahtzee or something like that. I can promise you, and that's what I always do all the time. So that's why I thought it was such an amazing idea that April reminded me. That's what everyone should do when you're learning to build Power Apps. Just go and have fun. Build a quick game. Now, don't go nuts and spend the next 3 years building a game, but like try to use your knowledge of a game and build an app. It'll force you to learn stuff that you probably would take months and months to figure out if you're trying to build it in a business process context. And in fact, I use gamification a lot when it comes to changing business processes. We know based on research that people want to belong, right? They want the social norm is actually something that's a huge driving factor. In fact, the UK government many years ago, probably decades ago now, started the whole kind of department or ministry, I guess, about social norm. So what they'll do is they'll say, hey, you didn't pay your taxes yet. Did you know that 94% of people in your tax bracket have already done their taxes in time and they've paid their taxes? And guess what? They actually found that people are changing their behavior because most people want to belong, right? When you think, nobody else is doing this, it's a lot easier to justify you not doing something. But when you're using gamification and using social norm as a way to actually encourage people to do the right behavior, it's a great way to change things. So I'll use that all the time. I'll build some games into a process and I'll change the behavior a little bit. Um, and if in finding ways that you can use gamification in your organization to change behaviors, I recommend that you do some research. Again, in the UK government, they have all sorts of good stories about, and I'm sure I can find them and send them to you if you're interested. But once you've figured out a fun game, again, those are all things that you're going to be leveraging. It's not like a waste of time here. Then look at solving a personal productivity problem. So something that you don't like doing and that takes you a lot of time that you just quickly automate. And don't try to over deliver here. Don't try to cast the net too wide. Just try to solve a problem for you. Something that, so for example, I did a presentation with a Microsoft employee who works in sales, and every week he has to produce a report for his manager, a PowerPoint presentation for his manager. They happen to use Dynamics. And the great thing about within Microsoft, they actually encourage their employees to access Power Platform for their production systems. It's amazing. They eat their own dog food. So We, in no time at all, we built a process. Actually, he built it. I just kind of got him started, but he built a process that automates this whole thing. Every Monday, it goes to Dynamics, looks at his sales, his activities and stuff, and it produces a quick report in a PowerPoint presentation for him. And this is actually something that was done just for him. But since then, I believe that he's actually been using it in his department for his team to do this. And when you do this at a greater scale, for example, a department, that's when you start having some benefits. So, for example, I have one of my clients is they do legal case management and they investigate organizations that are doing bad things. And they used to have police officers that used to like retired police officers that were the old crusty, I hate technology, and they had always their little notepads that they would write stuff. And then once every 3 months, they would say they would have to build something that was a case status summary. And they hated that because the worst thing for them to do was to stop everything they were doing every 3 months and then start entering this case status summary for their manager. And they did this because they were audited by the government and everything, so they had no choice but to do it. And when we said, hey, we're going to build a new system for you, and we're going to completely change everything you're doing, guess what? They all said, no way, I'm not going to do this. Do you want me to do my job, or do you want me to be, entering your notes and all these fancy stuff? So what we've done is we actually looked at the what's in it for me, right? So what we said is we said, look, you already keep track of your appointments in Outlook. You already send emails in Outlook. Your calendar appointments and stuff like that, and you already write your notes somewhere, right? So what if we created a place for you to where you can continue using your appointments, your emails, and your notes in your system. And if you enter your notes in the system, and when you create an appointment, for example, you make sure you enter this field here that says this is what case this relates to, we'll automatically create a case status summary for you. And it will be instant. It'll be up to the minute. So your manager will never ask you to do your case status summary ever again, because we'll do this for you. Well, guess what? That was the thing that all these investigators wanted to hear. And it automatically improved the way the team and the entire department did their work. And instead of having to react every 3 months where they realize, ooh, this is not looking good, they're able now to adapt really quickly because they can see the behavior, the patterns as early as every day. And so once you've looked at something like that from the department, and you may notice here that I'm really leveraging the same ideas that I started with. It's kind of starting with gamification, and I've done it now on the departmental side. So on the organizational side, then you can actually go and tackle an issue that your entire organization will benefit from solving. And so you've added value multiple times at various levels, but once you're at the organizational level, you're an expert at improving the organization. All right, I'll pause for questions, and then we will move on to the 5 apps. All right. So 5 easy app ideas. Now remember, when I talk about 5 easy apps, I'm talking about the lowest effort that we could leverage. And so every app that I'm going to show you here are apps that you can start with just a wizard or a template or something like that, but you can improve to really make a difference. And those are quick ways that you can add value to your organization. So the first one is the expense report. I know it sounds boring, right? But the expense report is something that every organization has to do. And it's probably the most tedious process that every single person has to do, especially if it involves like submissions and processes. Now, we've talked a little bit about how to do approval processes and spending limits and things like that, but there are actually apps that are built in that you can leverage to do this. So one of the things that you can do is if you go to, let's see if we can start this video. So if you go to your Power Apps system and you click on Create and you search for expense, guess what? There is a built-in expense app. That's pretty cool. And so if you click on the My Expense, you can build this. Now I've done it a few times, so it actually gives it a unique name. Then what it will do is it'll automatically create a connection to your system. And that connection, it's going to try to leverage whatever you have in your environment. By default, it'll try to put it in SharePoint. It could try to put it in a database if you wanted to, or whatever. And that's the great thing about it. And this error message you shouldn't get. It's just that I have actually enabled some preview features and I forgot to remove it from my video. So this expense app is built in with the Power Platform, and you can do this. And you might say, well, this doesn't meet my needs. That's fine, because all the logic to build this app is actually available for you. You can go in and change it. You want to change the colors, you want to change the logic, you can do all that. Let's see. So one of the things that you can do is, for example, you have your reports, right? You can go change the logic on what you want your reports to look like. You have your filter page that's built in. This is the fancy, oh, your report has been submitting and your item has been added. There's a few things like that that you can do. This is for new expense, right? So again, the fields that you want to capture here, it's up to you. By default, those are the fields that are there, but you can add all sorts of logic here and deleting and all that stuff. Now you can build the logic to decide, whether you want to allow people to do this, or maybe I don't want to allow the expense report to be deleted until it's been approved or something. But one of the things that you can do also, a lot of these sample apps, they have something called the collection and variables page. It just show you, here's the things that we use in this app. And then often they'll have things like, here's the instructions on how to deploy this. So if you click on that URL, it should take you to a URL that, well, an instruction report. There you go. And so now this is actually kind of a lengthy process. But again, I'm not trying to tell you here anything that you're going to have to write it down. I'm trying to give you the tools to say, here's how you can take advantage of this. So all the instructions are listed here, but there's some cool stuff that we can do here, right? And again, how the comments are done, the statuses are recorded, things like that, that's all in here. It's not magic. It's all in there, right? So if you want to add new statuses because your business process does this a different way, you can absolutely do that. So we'll just quickly skip through. The other thing that you can do, and this is actually, I don't know if you know this, but in the Power Apps platform, there is this cool thing that, let's see if we can get the video going. Come on. Let's see. We're having some technical difficulties here today. Okay, so there's this one control that you can add. It's not going to do, oh, there you go. There, it's working. Okay. So one of the controls that uses artificial intelligence, right, in the AI builder, that allows you to add a receipt processor. And what this thing will do is if you add it to your form, and you'll see I didn't do anything. I just added it to the form here. I can do scan receipt. I can grab a receipt here, and then it will use Azure Artificial Intelligence to actually go analyze the receipt. And then it'll extract line items from the receipt. So this is an example here of some stuff it used. Now I took the first receipt that I had. I just found a receipt on the internet. Hopefully there was nothing embarrassing. Well, this is great, right? And then if you actually use something like, if we use another receipt here, let's go, Mr. Receipt. There you go. So if we use a different receipt here to just something maybe that's more food, this is a French receipt for pizza. I like to keep it international. Automatically, what it should do here is it should identify the elements, right? So you have your line items, your individual totals, you've got all the taxes, you've got the amount, And then if you actually go into the how to use the text recognizer, it actually shows you that there's some properties that are available for you. So you can actually leverage that so that people don't even have to re-enter the receipts. They can actually just go in and take a picture and automatically extract the amounts and things like that. There's all sorts of fun stuff that's available here. I encourage you to take advantage of that. But in the past, to create something like this from scratch would have been ridiculous. And I know because I've built these things from scratch and it was ridiculous to build. Now it's available by just dragging and dropping these types of things. All right. So we've got about half an hour left, I believe. I think, yep. So let's move forward here. The number 2 app that we would recommend here is to build an employee onboarding app. Again, this is not earth-shattering, but employee onboarding, every new employee, typically in an organization, has to go through an onboarding process. And I don't know about you, but as an independent consultant, I go through a lot of onboarding processes, and it's always different. I can't tell you the number of times where I've joined an organization as a client and I wasn't able to do any work for probably 2 weeks or a month because they didn't have the computers for me, or they didn't have the accounts, or they didn't have things. And it was not like a consistent thing. It's different every time. And the reason for that is because employee onboarding has a lot of participants, right? It's got IT, HR, the telephone people, if they're different people, and there's different processes that are involved, different systems. So the IT or the employee onboarding app way to actually get all the stuff in one place and get people talking. Let's see if we can get the video going. So to create the employee onboarding, you would actually go to the create screen and you would click on the onboarding task. Now the onboarding tasks is actually an interesting thing here because when you first install it, it should usually screams at me when I do this. Yes, the AI builder is extra cost. And I typically try to stay away from licensing information because I'm just not that smart. But if you have any questions about licensing, we can definitely look at that after. So when you start with the employee onboarding task, one of the things that it does is it gives you the ability here to make the app your own app. And what it's doing is it's asking you to select a place where you want to store the information. So normally I would pick OneDrive for Business. Again, later we can talk about putting it in SharePoint or in Dataverse or something like that. But I always like to get started quickly to just see how it works. And then just because it's a super user-friendly process, I have to go through this thing here where I have to save the app. So I'll just do that before I do anything. And once the app is created, I can just go back here. So now and this, by the way, I've had this happen a few times where you have to click on it twice, especially if you need to authorize a new connection. But once you've got this step going, there's this at the screen called the Add Admin screen. If you run it, you can add yourself as an admin. And the great thing about that, and you just need to do that really once. Once you've done that or you've added an admin, the great thing then is that it'll actually let you now do some configuration. You'll notice, by the way, there was a little message that says, please add a valid user. Not a great user experience here. It just resets it. When you add your user and you say add, it goes back and it says, oh, well, his field is empty. That's an invalid username, so please add a good username. But once you've done that, you've added yourself as an admin, you actually have access to some cool magic here. I didn't want that. All right. So now if I go to my OneDrive, which is where I'm saving the data, you'll see that a couple of minutes ago, under Power Apps and Templates, it created the onboarding task. And because, again, I had selected the OneDrive, it actually created an Excel spreadsheet for me where it stores all the data. Now, the great thing about this is all these steps that are here, like the tasks that you want people to do, the resources that are available for them with the URLs, and the teams you want them to be able to go to, the links, the company name, all that stuff, that's all built into this Excel spreadsheet. So the great thing here is quickly you can do something that will look like your own app. And this is just a start, right? We can add a lot of value here, but this is a great way to integrate all the information together. Now, behind the scene, there's so one of the challenge here is implementing this app in the firewall for employees that are not in AD quite yet, and we should definitely talk about that. So creating a process to email or share this. Now, one of the things that I like to use when it comes to allowing people to do things that are not authenticated yet is I like to use Microsoft Forms, and I like to automate a process with Microsoft Forms. So, send them a link. So have maybe someone in HR, when the employee has been hired, but they haven't been created to AD yet, to automatically send them a unique link, right? To say, hey, welcome, we're so excited, looking forward to have you. Can you please fill this information for us, right? And it's a unique link, and you can actually have a business process behind the scene that when the form gets created, and then, when you email it, you can share this, even if it's a form, you can share the Microsoft form to an external user without being authenticated. And again, I would just remind you that if you share a form to the outside, there's still the ability for someone somehow to figure out that link and go in and add stupid stuff in the form, right? So you might want to have some kind of validation when the form comes in that yes, this is the right thing, or yes, the email address that was entered is an email address that someone we sent this form to. Some process like that, just to make sure that we're not allowing just people to go and trigger processes, but it's definitely possible. And so this form here that I've just showed you is a quick way to do this. Now, behind the scenes, what I usually do with this form is I'll build all sorts of automated process, right? So when this person does this, right, because you can add new tasks here, you can say, here's the things you're supposed to do, right? So please go fill your non-disclosure agreement. Please go, what's the other one? There's a declaration of conflict of interest. For example, go sign these policies. You can actually build these to-dos in the employee's to-do list, and you can do a process behind the scene that will automatically, so here's the form that you need to fill, your conflict of interest form, all that stuff, and then automate the process to send emails or to take the next steps. So for example, if an employee has declared that they have a conflict of interest, maybe something needs to happen. Maybe you need to schedule an appointment with someone in HR to go through this or whatever. Again, these are all the things that normally we do manually. We can automate these things. All right, there's still so much more I want to go through. Let's go to the number 3. Return to workplace. So arguably these apps are not necessarily in the right order. But when I was rehearsing this presentation, I found it very depressing because the more we were going through the apps, the more serious and scary and more COVID oriented they were. So I tried to mix and match my apps a little bit. But the Return to a Workplace app is a great app that is really around protecting your workforce during each phase of the return to work, right? And depending what state you're in, you might be at different stages of return to work. But the whole thing here is that we have processes here to automate this across the organization, and this is probably for larger organizations. And let's be honest, right? This is probably a process we're going to have to go through a few times again. So the app is actually a pretty cool app because what it allows you to do is allows you to control letting people go into the organization by requesting passes and looking up the status of a office. Right? Is this office in this state or in whatever this headquarters? Are they open? Are we allowed to go in? Do I feel safe returning to work? Right. So the app has this built in. You just kind of go in. You say, okay, I want to go in. I want to book a room. I select a facility that I want to go to. And then basically, once you selected the facility, you can look at the status. It says, yeah, we're planning to go here, or whatever it is. So in this case, if the facility is not open yet, you would not have the option to book a space. But you see here at the bottom, you have the ability to book a space so that you can say, okay, well, I want to go in and do some work. And when you book the space, then you pick the facility you want, and then, of course, it'll know based on the last one you looked at, it'll tell you the status, and then you pick the location where you want to book. You want to pick the when you're going to arrive, and then it takes you through the legalese of what this is your healthy or daily health check. So again, in order to use this, your company name must legally be changed to Contoso. I'm sorry, that's just the way Microsoft works. Or you could also go into the configuration behind the scene and change this information, and we'll show you how to do that. So do you agree with the following statements? Again, each organization has different statements, but this is the whole point. When these rules, we talked about this before, when the business rules change, I don't want to have to retrain everybody. It's just, if you have a new rule because the state has implemented new rules, you can put that in your app here. And the next time I do a self-declaration or return to work, it'll tell me the new instructions here. So you click I agree, and then it gives you like a cute little QR code to say you can now go to this facility on this date. And I didn't do this in September 29th. This is actually screenshots that I took from Microsoft. And then if you said, I'm not doing so well, it's got some cute stuff that, cute little image. So you feel better about feeling sick. But on the other side, the cool thing about this is that Microsoft has tons of dashboards. I'm going to go really quickly here because we're running low on time. But Microsoft has all sorts of dashboards that are built in for you to kind of monitor and manage this return to work. So you have the whole system at a glance here. That just gives you the metrics for returning to work, and including the current values that you have and your goals, and whether individual locations in your company have met their goals. And then you have phases that you go through. So whether we're in planning, initial return, scaling up, and how we're doing. Remember, business intelligence is always about yes, and make sure there's no PII. Personal information, again, I'm horrible with acronyms, but personal information identification, I think. So remember that business intelligence and business process engineering is about planning. Thank you. Planning, monitoring, and adapting. Right. So you don't want to go nuts and say, this is the new rule. This is what we're going to do, and just blindly follow it. Right? You want to plan. We're going to do this. Our goals are to do this, and that means you need to build the rules in place to be able to monitor. Are we doing the right thing? Are we following what we said? Are we getting the behavior that we expected? And then adapt quickly. Right. So, hey, we thought this would returning earlier would be good. But we found that the number of cases are now going up. Maybe we need to adapt. Right. You want to build that into every process. And this is a great example. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this app, and it sounds like a scary app, but it's actually a very well-designed app that I would recommend. Look at it, play with it, because there's lots of things to learn from that. I learned a lot from going through this app. And I've been playing with Power Apps for a very long time, and I just discovered new ways to use Power Apps when I was exploring this app. So there's all sorts of dashboards here. I'm not going to go through the number of dashboards, but cases per day and things like that. The individual facilities, all that stuff. we're just going to go through quickly here. And then you have the overview page that gives you all the information. And again, this is great, right? Your executives love having these fancy dashboards. It's shiny, it's beautiful, and they love it. Yes, and if in case I'm super boring, remember that if you leave, it's going to cost you potentially $25. You're going to miss out on the gift card. All right, so we're just going to keep going here. And then if you want to install this, it's actually, there's a URL here. I got it displayed here, but honestly, if you search for Power Platform Return to Workplace, it'll show you all the steps here that you can go through. It shows you your requirements. You need Power Apps, you need Power BI, you need admin rights, at least to the Power Platform admin rights to be able to deploy this. And you do need a workplace in Power BI Desktop to do this. And then it walks you through the steps to deploy this. So I will spare you the trouble here of going through these steps one by one. Again, this session is about giving you the tools to start deploying these apps as opposed to teaching you how to deploy these apps one by one. But you have the individual apps here that you can download. Again, they walk you through the process to do that. And then there's extensive documentation, if I can get to that. Extensive documentation here on how to deploy it. Now, you probably want to plan an hour to an hour and a half, but don't tell anybody that it took you an hour to an hour and a half. Tell them it took you the whole week, and you can look like a hero. It needs Dataverse, and again, Dataverse is the new name for Common Data Services. You need Dataverse to do this, and it's actually a great app. So, and we'll talk about later if we in the chat. One of the things that you can do here is you can integrate this with a chatbot, so you can have the conversation a lot more natural than just having people click through, which means you can also do cool things like integrate with telephony systems and things like that. But let's move on to the next app because we've got still a few apps to go through. And there's instructions on how to extend it, which is what I was talking about earlier, some of the cool things that you can do. Number 4 app, service request. So this is an example of service request, as far as I'm concerned, is a lot less involved than the return to workplace. But we're talking about COVID was starting to get depressing, so I kind of switch it up a little bit. So the service request is actually another one of these things where, and when we're talking about service requests, we're not just talking about IT here, right? It could be a different department. Every department has different service requests. So the ability to create this quick app that allows you to have IT, facilities, HR to do a service, and then to actually dispatch these service requests to the various departments and the various systems, right? And that's the great thing about it, is that we've talked a little bit about hiding the complexities of business process. The other thing that users don't really care about is, oh, if it's this type of process, go to this system. But if it's this type of process, go to this system. In this case, I want to move my mouse to the left because I'm left-handed, so I need help desk to come and help me with this. I can make that request and I can just send that. Now it will figure out, because the department is, it will figure out who to send this to. So to create this app, you just go to the makethepowerapps.com and you just click on new service request, and then it'll build this app. Now, the same thing as we went through before. By default, it'll try to set you up with kind of some default environment so that you can get this app going as quick as possible. Once you've got the app going, you can actually switch the information behind the scenes. So you can switch it to a database or to things like that. I always say database, Dataverse, SharePoint. So that's what I'm doing here at the top here where it says make my own app. So I'll click on that and I'll actually switch that to using OneDrive for Business because I am lazy and I want to get this going as quickly as possible. Again, I know it's very tempting when you go through these apps to say, oh, no, we'll never store this in Excel. We want to store it in a SQL Server database, or yeah, maybe that's what you want to do once you're done. But keep in mind that the whole value of using the Power Platform is that you're able to iterate quickly and you're able to adapt to changing business needs. The first thing you want to do is walk through this with your stakeholders and say, is this what you want? It magically saves the information somewhere. Don't worry about where it saves it right now. We'll fix that later, right? So the ability here to go and quickly prototype this that actually works, that saves the data, something that you could potentially use if you wanted to in production. But as you know, you're starting to have more users and stuff like that, you're able to actually connect to maybe more robust system than just an Excel spreadsheet. So behind the scene, you'll see that it's got all the information about your tickets, the types of tickets, the filters you want to allow people to use, all the statuses that you want to have because your business process might be different, the priority types you have, who your attendants are to monitor the request, and what the account name types are. And let's go to last one. And last one, actually, I'll go really quickly here because the last one is pretty involved, and you have to trust me. It's an amazing app. It's the crisis communication app. So the crisis communication app is an app that allows you to facilitate communicating to your stakeholders and your users when there's something bad going on. And it's really sad that unfortunately we've had to come up with these apps really quickly over the last year. I wish that we were building these apps just because we were planning carefully and that we were proactive. But the reality is that every organization went through this process over the last year. So this app is built with the idea that these types of things will continue happening and we should probably have something to communicate to our users. You'll notice that the crisis communication app is actually designed to work within Teams because it is really becoming the one place to communicate with our users. That's the best and most useful way to communicate to our users. There's lots of instructions to deploy this. It takes about 20-25 minutes to deploy this. And there are fancy videos to do this, and actually much more eloquent than I am at presenting this. I would recommend you go through this. But this is, again, when your executives say, hey, we need to be able to communicate to our user when the next crisis is happening, you can be the hero. You can actually demonstrate an app really quickly that looks good, that you can customize with your business process and your flows to do this. Now, they actually use, it's a very creative way of using flows to actually deploy the app. So there's workflows here or Power Automate flows that you will call once just to deploy the app. And then some of the other flows that will happen when people do stuff. Cool thing about that is you can do things like location updates for location awareness, additional status messages, and things like that for presence information and things like that. All right, so I'm sorry I'm not doing this one justice, but I want to wrap this up quickly. So what is next after this, right? So what else can you do with the Power Platform? The one thing we haven't talked about today is you have something called Power Virtual Agent. And Power Virtual Agent is something that allows you to quickly create a chatbot that you can integrate. What a lot of people don't know is inside of Teams, when you create a team in Teams, you can actually build a Power Virtual Agent for free, and you can actually feed it with existing stuff. So, for example, if we're still on the topic of COVID, and your company already has an amazing, 200-page document that answers every single question you could have about COVID and returning to work and things like that, you can sure ask people to read this entire document, or you can actually upload the document to Power Virtual Agent as a way to get it started. And what it will do is it'll automatically parse the document for you and come up with a series of questions and answers. And then the cool thing about that is you can expose that new bot to that team. Let's say it's the HR team or the crisis communication team, and users can go there and ask a question. And the bot will actually try to figure out what the user is asking, and it will try to come up with the most relevant question. Now, once that's done, you can actually go in and customize that question and the decision tree. But if you haven't played with Power Virtual Agent, I strongly recommend it. And again, if you want a demo of this, I'm sure I can set up some time to show you this. The other thing that I would recommend you look at is take advantage of things like AI. Yes, it is a bit more expensive, but take a look, because AI, if you got any type of data reentry that you have to do, taking advantage of the ability for the system to actually automatically extract information can save you some time. And maybe what you don't want to do, or maybe you don't trust it enough to say, well, I'm automatically going to let you enter the data for me. I'm wrapping up, I promise. Maybe what you want to do is you want it to use it to prioritize things, right? Just like the post office does. When the post office works, they can actually triage where they want to route your mail by looking at the zip code of the postal code. And if they can't figure it out, then they'll sort it to manual sorting. But that's a more efficient way than someone just manually sorting every single piece of mail. You can do the same thing with AI to leverage, look at invoices when they come in, forms and things like that, and automatically extract the information to route it. And if you're dealing with millions and millions of new things coming in every day or every week, that's a great way to help you focus your efforts. And yes, yeah, I think you're muted there.
Yeah, I am. That's awesome. I hate to do this to you, but I got 1 minute to give away $25, and we'll do it really quick. We're going to give it to Brenda Anderson. Brenda, you are the winner. Why don't you send me your email address, and we'll get that for you. Hugo, we can't thank you enough. As always great. And your maximum information per minute, man. In my book. Everybody hang in there, and I put a link in the chat to the next the lunchtime session, which we're going to talk about stuff over that happened during Ignite. Appreciate everybody coming. There'll be a survey at the end of the day. Please hang out and wait for that. We're going to give away a Surface Go 2 at the end of the day, so you want to fill out that survey at the end. That's how you're going to get registered for that. And thanks again, Hugo. Thanks for everybody for attending, and we'll see you in the next meeting.
Congratulations, Brenda. Thank you. I've got my Twitter and my blog there. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm not going to respond to you, but don't hesitate to reach out. No, I'm just kidding. I'm